Hi, I'm Christina, and in this video, I'm going to show you the $50 hidden gem dresser set that taught me everything I needed to know about furniture, and maybe even about myself.
I bought this dresser and nightstand for $50 on Facebook Marketplace. It was early in my furniture refinishing journey, and while something about it caught my eye, I mostly chose it because they offered delivery. I wish the answer was deeper than that, but I couldn't fit a dresser in my car, so I was that easy. There was only one picture on the listing, and the orange wood was blinding. I had no idea the quality I was getting though. I just thought, hey, it's a dresser, it's cheap, and it's got delivery. It's perfect. Turns out, this was a 1949 Streamline Moderne set. What's that, you say? Yeah, good question. I said the same thing and I couldn't Google fast enough. When the piece arrived, I could tell it wasn't quite mid-century modern, but I had no idea what it was. Luckily, the date was stamped on the back because figuring it out wasn't that easy when I didn't even know what I didn't know. Streamline Moderne or Art Moderne is sometimes referred to as an offshoot of Art Deco, but it was all about modernity and curving lines, and boy were these drawers curved. A solid 1.5 inch thick carved drawer fronts. This thing was a heavy beast. A very high quality, lovely beast, but the bottom, cedar lined drawer and hinge top alone weighed 17 pounds. And is this where I mentioned that I didn't really have room for this thing at the time? I had like one nightstand at a time project space. To work on it outside, I had to get it down a hallway and down 3 steps, and then back up again when I was done. This project was powered by stubbornness, overly optimistic spatial planning, and a deep denial of how gravity works. The drawers were covered in mahogany veneer and the top in walnut, though I couldn't have identified that at the time. I think I spent more time Googling than sanding on this piece. Just kidding, the sanding felt endless. There was some minor damage, but only one major problem with the set, and that was that it was orange. Like, offensively orange. Like if there was a furniture jail, this thing had committed a felony by being so orange. It might not look that orange in a lot of these shots, which probably had more to do with my camera settings than anything, but this was probably the closest to how it looked in real life, though I think even that still underplays the orange glow. So there I was, still a complete beginner. I had a $20 sander, no real plan, and an unexpectedly high quality but aggressively orange behemoth of a dresser. But I also had the possibly mistaken belief that I could make this set better, and I think somehow I did. This turned into one of my favorite transformations, and I think this set made me better too. I started by cleaning the pieces, round 1 of hauling them outside. I used TSP cleaner back then, though these days I usually reach for pre-paint, crud cutter, or simple green. The goal is to use a degreaser to get rid of any grime or furniture polish buildup so you're not just grinding that into the wood when you sand. This sizable lady was over 70 years old with possible layers of buildup, so she got a few rounds of cleaning. Disgusting. I also removed the door from the nightstand to make sanding and painting easier, and even that tiny door was heavy for its size. Then I started sanding. And sanding. And sanding. I was using a $20 detail sander, and while it got the job done eventually, it took forever. If you're just getting started and only buying one cheap sander to see if you like this kind of work, get an orbital sander. Trust me, your arms, hands, and schedule will thank you. There were a few spots of damage, some gouges, and a couple chunks missing, but luckily these were only on the sides or frame, and the top and drawer fronts were in pretty good condition. I fixed the damaged spots with Bondo wood filler, which is very strong, but the working time is limited, so you have to be quick about it. Then I had to, yes, you guessed it, sand the Bondo flush so it was smooth. The inside of the drawers needed a refresh, so I sanded those too. Did I mention a million years had passed and I was still sanding? And still hauling this beast in and out of the house every time I worked on it? I almost gave up on this dresser every time, or at least every 10 minutes while I was sanding. I even tried to brainstorm a paint design that would let me only sand the middle of the drawers. I mean, I could have done a simple scuff sand and then gone right to painting, but once I started sanding the top and got a better look at the wood grain, not to be dramatic, but I think I fell a little bit in love. I didn't even know I had a favorite wood. I still had no idea what kind it was, I just knew it was beautiful, and that I couldn't stop now. I couldn't leave it half raw, half painfully orange. I needed to turn this piece into more than what it was. I was going through a lot at the time, and even though this dresser didn't fix anything, the process of working on it, slowly, in fits and starts, gave me something I really needed. It gave me direction and momentum, and the belief that if I kept trying, if I just kept going, I could take something sitting for years in someone's basement, forgotten, overlooked, and way too orange, and breathe new life into it. make it into something someone else would cherish, and through that, maybe I'd discover that there was more to me than I thought as well. That's really deep for sanding some wood, right? But did I mention I'd been sanding for an eternity? Just me, a cheap sander, the constant buzzing, and way too many thoughts in my head. Once the top and drawers were finally stripped and I took a break for a while, my sister was kind enough to let me finish the project at her house, which meant more space and no stairs. A luxury. By this point, I could clearly see that the drawers and top were different woods, and I had never stained anything before. So, back to Google. I quickly went down a rabbit hole of wood types, end grain versus faced grain, plain sawn versus quarter sawn, and I'll stop before your eyes glaze over. But let's just say I'm no expert now, but I learned so much trying to identify the wood on this set. If you're just starting out, I really recommend trying to identify the wood on your first few pieces, even if you're just painting them. It'll teach you most of what you need to know. The top of the dresser, though interestingly not the nightstand, turned out to be walnut. The drawers were likely mahogany, maybe even rosewood, which really only mattered because the different woods had totally different undertones. The top was brown, the drawers were red. I hoped that by using a darker stain, I could blend the differences a bit. Hoped being the key word here. My first attempt at staining the top didn't go that well. I'd done some basic research and then made a trip to the hardware store, eager to see what the wood would look like in all its stained beauty. But I bought a penetrating oil stain and I don't know how beginner friendly that is, especially without using a wood conditioner first. To say I was disappointed after that first coat is a massive understatement. It came out blotchy, thanks mostly to natural variation in the grain. And if you're thinking I instantly paused to reassess, well, you'd be wrong. Apparently, I thought the answer was doing a second coat of what hadn't worked the first time. Spoiler, it wasn't. But I still went ahead and stained the drawer fronts, which didn't look as blotchy as the top. But the different wood tone colors were still really obvious. So after another internet deep dive and one more trip to the hardware store, I picked up a gel stain in dark walnut. It helped so much. It deepened the color and evened out the blotchiness and undertones. I wish I had footage of me using the gel stain on the top or drawer fronts, but I think I got a little distracted taking glamour shots of the wood grain glowing at golden hour on a perfect fall day. The gel stain went on much like the oil stain. Brush or cloth application, let it sit a couple minutes, then wipe back the excess with a lint-free cloth. I tested it on the top edge of the drawers too, but the poplar underneath the veneer basically said, absolutely not. It looked terrible, so I decided I'd just paint those edges to match the body. Once I was done admiring how rich the drawers looked, honestly, I still love them, I got back to work. I was flying by the seat of my pants when it came to an overall design plan, but I did know that before I painted, I needed to prime. At this point, I'd read enough to know that between the leftover stain on the bodies and the tannins in the wood, bleed through could absolutely be a problem. Even if your paint says it has a built-in primer, I still recommend using a separate stain-blocking primer in this situation. Shellac works great for this, and shellac-based primer, while incredibly stinky, is something I reach for a lot. I taped off the top, and yes, I'm fully aware that there were probably 100 easier ways to tape off these curves than using 2-inch strips of painter's tape, but this is what I did, and it worked. I also taped around the inside edges of the drawer openings because I think it gives a cleaner, more finished look. Then I got to priming. I use Zinsser Bin shellac-based primer. I like applying it with a 4-inch foam roller and a foam brush for corners and tight spots. And if you're priming after staining with an oil-based stain like I did, you don't have to worry about letting any parts where there was overlap dry for days like you would with a water-based primer. If you're enjoying this video, make sure you like and subscribe for more furniture flips, beginner flailings, and the rare moment where a project actually behaves. And here is more gratuitous footage of the stained top. What can I say? The camera was in love with it too. While I taped and primed, I noticed a couple small parts where the wood split on a couple drawers and the nightstand hinge area. Some more internet research and an Amazon delivery for glue syringes later, I glued up the spots and clamped them to dry. But I highly recommend doing this in the beginning, before you even sand, so you're not creating extra work for yourself. The more you know. Next up was paint. I tried a cream color I already had, testing it on the nightstand to get an idea, but it was an instant nope. The contrast with the dark wood washed out the cream, so my thinking was that I'd need more saturation. My main goal was a paint color that would complement the wood, which was the real star of the show. I wanted something calm and modern, and if it toned the red undertones of the wood down a bit more, that'd be a bonus. Green is across from red on the color wheel, and color is relational, so I knew somewhere in the blue-green or green family was my best bet. Then I promptly geeked out on mixing colors for way too long. I always have a blast playing Mixologist, but if you're pressed for time, you can buy cabinet or furniture paint at hardware stores and decide using one of their bajillion paint chips. I used Fusion mineral paint, and I started by mixing paisley, a blue-gray, and limestone, a buttercream. I knew it was too blue and kept mixing. I actually went full mad scientist, adding a little bit of everything I had, and I couldn't give you a recipe if I tried. I narrowed down my options to 3 choices and swatched them on the dresser. I knew the winner right away, but I had to examine them closely, because of course I needed more shots of the beautiful wood. But I chose the middle one, this green-gray with blue undertones, like a eucalyptus. I'm so glad I went with that because I think it complemented the rich dark wood, and later it ended up being an absolutely perfect choice to use in a bedroom makeover for my niece. I painted the bodies of the dresser and nightstand with 2 coats of my custom Fusion paint mix, and I was feeling pretty great. This paint has a built-in top coat that I thought was enough for the sides and bodies of the set. So now these ladies were decked out in their finest. All that was left was the finishing touches, and they'd be ready for the ball. Except, oh no, there was an unexpected problem. When I peeled the tape off the top, there were no crisp lines. The paint had bled underneath the tape. And maybe I hadn't let the stain dry long enough because it lifted some of it off and you could clearly see the tape lines on my lovely wood grain that I had worked so hard on and admired so much. I didn't cry over a furniture misstep. I didn't. Okay, I did. Just a tiny bit, because this dresser had come to symbolize my belief that perseverance, that straight up, dogged, stick-to-itness could make something better. For a moment, I doubted and wondered if I'd ruined it and would have to paint the top after all. But the key was to keep trying, so I very lightly sanded the edges where the paint bled and gave the whole top a careful sanding with a high grit, making sure to try and feather out where that tape line in the stain was visible. I applied another coat of gel stain and crossed my fingers it would work to disguise my mistake. And it did. I used an artist's brush to touch up the paint along the top edge where my sanding was obvious. Luckily, I hadn't taped along the drawer fronts yet to paint the top edges, so I let them sit for some extra days to make sure the stain had fully dried before I taped them. This was the key because I painted 2 coats on the edges, removed the tape, and the stain was left intact. Score. Then I used a hard wax oil and an ultra-fine Scotch-Brite pad on the top and drawer fronts to protect the wood and add more depth. The key when you're applying it is to let the wood soak up what it wants, then really buff out the excess. Like, work up a little bit of a sweat. That's how you know you've buffed it enough. I used Howard feed and wax and a brush on the insides of the drawers, and oh boy, look at that wood. Time for more glamour shots. That mahogany was mesmerizing. And then this piece was done. As I stepped back to take it all in, how far the piece and I had come, I felt this quiet sense of wonder. This project had made me fall in love with what was underneath. It gave me the confidence to trust my instincts and to keep trying. It taught me that sometimes, even when you don't know what you're doing, you're actually learning exactly what you need to know.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm so glad I stuck with this piece and let it teach me everything I needed to know. If you've ever had a project teach you something bigger, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you're just here for the sanding dust and the stubborn dresser drama, I hope you'll stick around and say hi too. Liking and subscribing are the easiest way to support my channel. If you feel moved to support it further, I'll link ways you can do that in the description. One small tip equals one giant leap for sanding dust and questionable color choices. And you'll want to stick around, because coming up on the channel, I have a roadside rescue coffee table that did not want to cooperate, a 3-bedroom, 5-day beach house makeover that nearly broke my sister and me, and a desk where I was still too scared to use power saws, so I broke out the wood chisel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.